Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, if I know something that is true about you, you are go, 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 doing all the things, and you're running a business. You might be running a household. You might be running all the things in the world. And sometimes you might just forget your why. You might just forget to take care of little old you, your health, your happiness, and all of that. So I want to talk about that. Let's simplify that down today. My special guest today is Courtney Townley, and she's been helping women around the world take better care of themselves with more consistency and ease for the last 20 years. She's the host of the podcast Grace and Grit, and she helps women expand the definition of health far beyond the topics of diet and exercise. She's a level 2 certified nutrition coach through Precision Nutrition, and she's also rooted in behavioral change science. So we're talking way deeper than just what are you eating and how much you're exercising. But she's also a certified strength coach, and she's passionate about a multidimensional approach to wellness and deeply believes about the right dose of grace and grit while anything is possible. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Courtney Townley. Hey, Courtney.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And I really do love talking about topics like this when it comes to self-care. Because let's face it, right? Being a business owner, it's not easy. There is a lot that goes into it, and you are go, 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 and moving into that masculine space of asking for the sale and, hitting your revenue numbers and doing the more, right? But then there's also the feminine side of things, of realizing to take care of yourself and to nourish yourself and feel more in flow as well. So tell us more about your journey to the work that you do on your podcast and as a coach in helping women reclaim their health and happiness.
Yeah, I think so many of us in sort of the coaching space sort of got into it because we had our own sort of experience with it, our own transformation. And that was certainly true of my journey. I actually come from the dance world. So from a young age up until my mid-20s, I was dancing professionally. And I don't know if you know anything about the dance world, but it's not a super lucrative career. Yeah. And so I was looking for ways to make money to support me going through college and all of these things. And I started to teach some fitness classes. Lo and behold, I actually fell in love with it. I really loved teaching people how to move their bodies. And I also started to recognize that as much as I had this passion for teaching people how to move their bodies, movement alone wasn't enough. And I personally got to a place in my late 20s where I was the really fit looking trainer who was a train wreck. Like I was physically broken. I was exhausted every afternoon. I mean, I was taking 2 to 3 hour naps every day. My joints hurt. My digestion was off. I just had this knowing that this cannot be right, right? Like there's something off. And at the same time, I had a lot of clients that I was working with who were all kind of transforming before my eyes. And this sounds terrible, but I knew it wasn't really the work that I was doing with them because I wasn't having those results, right? I was teaching them how to be better movers, but that was it. And so I started asking them, it was a small group of women, what they were doing. And that, lo and behold, they were all working with the same health coach. So they were addressing the entire enchilada of health, right? All of the facets. They were getting more sleep. They were dealing with stress. They were hydrated. They were addressing their nutrition. And so I hired the same coach. And I worked with her for almost 2 years, completely revolutionized my health story. And at the end of that 2 years, there's just no way I could go back to just teaching people how to move their bodies better. Yeah. Because even though people want to learn how to move their body better, people were coming into my business truly because they just wanted to feel better. And I couldn't really help them with that if I was just addressing this one avenue. So that really started my journey into health coaching. That was almost 15 years ago. And I slowly started moving out of my brick and mortar business and moving more into health coaching online because clients were referring me to people that weren't local. And it's become an enormous passion project of mine. And I started the Grace and Grit podcast mainly because I feel like a lot of women are wading through the same misinformation that I was, that if I just exercised hard enough and if I just restricted my diet enough, everything would be okay.
Right.
And I was doing a lot of those things and I was actually feeling worse. And so I had to kind of get myself out of that hole myself. And then, of course, now that's what I help my clients do.
Well, and that's so interesting that you should say that. And I think it points back to what you talked about of having a multidimensional approach to health and happiness. I mean, it isn't just eat less and exercise more. More time in the gym. This is from my own personal experience. I feel like I work out more than I ever have in my entire life in the last couple of years. And I'm like, why isn't the scale changing as much as it should be? Exercising more does not equal, more health and happiness. There is more to it. The sleeping, like you say, the keeping hydrated, the lowering the stress as much as possible. And what's interesting is for me, my journey is so counterintuitive. The moment where I chose to surrender and actually do less in my life, things started to fall into place. So it's not always more. And I know that you mentioned on your podcast and certainly seen it on your website, this idea that you really need to focus on self-respect before focusing on self-love. What do you mean by that?
So I hear a lot in the diet culture and sort of just a body positive culture these days that, and first of all, those are not the same industries,
yes.
right? Body positive and diet are almost opposition.
Yeah.
But I do hear this phrase of body love all the time. Like you have to love yourself. And you know what? That is a fantastic aspiration. And absolutely, that is what I hope for every woman on the planet. However, when you've been a woman who's been in a space of self-loathing, and beating yourself up for years, decades, a lifetime, asking yourself all of a sudden to just love yourself is a really big ask, to the point that it can actually turn women away. Like, come on, like, how do I even start there?
Yeah.
And so that is literally the question that I get from women, like, where do I start in this journey of repairing my relationship with myself? And I always tell them that, you meet people every single day that you don't really know, and you don't love them necessarily. Like you don't have this real affection for them. Maybe you do. Maybe you're, a Buddhist. I don't know. Maybe you have that level of love for everybody. But most of us, we have to build a relationship. But the thing that you can access right away for all of humanity is respect. And that's why I tell women, you can start by respecting yourself. Right? Knowing that you're doing all these things, like you said in your intro, you've built the business, you've built the family, there's all these facets to your life that you worked really hard to build. And unfortunately, you sacrificed your health and maybe your self-image in the process. Not everybody, but a lot of women, because I work with a lot of women 40 plus and very high achievers, and this is kind of their story. And so I tell them the simplest way the simplest gateway to self-respect is gratitude. Many women are in the habit of looking for all the things that are wrong with their body. And if you look, you're going to find a lot of evidence for things that don't match up to what popular culture is pushing. And how is that useful to you? How does that make you do better? It doesn't make you do better from a space of love, which I would argue, isn't really a way to get to health because you can't hate your way healthy.
Yeah.
And so if you right now in this moment, ask yourself, like, what is my body doing awesomely well in this moment? I'm listening to a podcast. That's pretty incredible. My ears are working, right? I woke up this morning to serve, my clients and my family, and I was able to walk to work. We don't take enough time just to recognize the small things that our body is doing awesomely well every day. And if we can pause and reconsider that, it's amazing how the energy shifts in the moment. And when I'm sure listeners will be able to identify with this, when you value things and you respect things, you tend to treat them better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's always shocking when you really think about the negative self-talk. Like you would never say that to a friend. You might even never say that to an enemy, but you so easily say that to yourself. And it builds up over time that it becomes the dialogue that you're having every morning in the mirror when you're getting dressed, or every morning before you decide what you're going to put on your breakfast plate. It happens in those 1,000 daily choices. And I dare say, if I can be so bold, it fits right into the diet culture, because diet culture goes, aha, this is a pain that you are broken and you need to solve. So go buy this protein shake, this workout gear, this app, this, because you are broken and you need fixing. And that's where we get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I always talk about the space between self-compassion and self-discipline. Yeah. Because really self-discipline, the type of self-discipline that I promote as a health coach, is born out of self-respect, not out of self-hate, not out of, wanting to improve yourself to, appease everybody else in the world.
Yep.
The self-discipline I'm talking about comes from a place of reverence for the life that you get to live and the body that allows you to live that way. And so it's a very different approach than trying to basically hate your way healthy. Yeah. Right? Identifying everything that's wrong with you, everything that's broken, and then trying to somehow fix all of that, which really never works anyway, which the diet industry is an amazing example of that, right? Because the failure rate is insanely high.
Yeah. Well, something you just said there, I want to put a pin in the map here, because I feel like you've said it in a different way that's like opened up something new in my brain. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, good.
The word that you used was reverence. And I think that there's something beautiful about that. The reverence and really just recognizing your body is on a journey. It's healing. It is moving in different ways than it did maybe last week or last month. But that's okay. I think there is a lot, and I'll be the first to admit it. I struggle sometimes with body positivity, because I am that girl that's like, girl, I don't know if I like you, body, right now. But I think there is something to that, of giving yourself reverence and respect, as you say, that you are healing, you are growing, you are evolving over time.
And even the things that we judge so harshly, we have such an obesity stigma in the world today, which is insane to me, because a weight challenge is one expression of inflammation or sort of chemistry, a little bit disrupted. Yeah. But it's only one of thousands of different expressions. And we tend to hyper-focus on it. And even with a weight challenge, your body thinks it's doing you a favor. And this is what we fail to know. Like we go to war with our body, telling ourselves that something's broken in our body and our body is wrong and that there's, something that needs to be fixed, all those things. And in reality, your body is getting a hormonal message and basically listening to that message and doing what it is designed to do. And then we think that it's something's wrong with it. So it's completely messed up. When really we need to be listening to our body, taking responsibility for our choices, and just moving in the direction of really trying to live with integrity. And what I mean by that is lining up our actions with what we say it is we want for our life. And I'm talking way beyond how you want to look. How do you want to live? How do you want to feel? And this is something I would encourage all listeners to do today. Define what healthy means for you. Here's why I think that's such an important question. When I ask that to a client, healthy means being able to keep up with my kids when we go for a hike. Healthy means taking on any type of new activity with confidence, knowing that I might not be the best one in the room, but I deserve to be there just as much as anybody. Yeah. It's feeling like you're living life full out, right? And I rarely hear women defining health as a number on the scale or a clothing size. And yet, what are they using to measure their progress along their journey, they're using the scale and they're using clothing measurements. And I do think there's a way to use those things in a healthy way. However, most women are not using them in a healthy way.
Oh, yeah.
They're using them as, basically saying, oh, you know what? I did everything right this week. I didn't lose a pound. I'm failing. Something's wrong with me. And they go down into that downward spiral.
Mm-hmm. I should give up. I should go straight for the fried chicken. I should,
Right.
Oh, well, it's a lost cause. Yeah.
Exactly. And I always say to my clients jokingly, like when they have a week where they've totally been on point, they have shown themselves such incredible respect through their behaviors. They get on that scale and they're like, oh, I didn't lose any weight. And I'll say, okay, so should you quit? Like, are you going to stop doing everything you did this week just because you didn't lose a couple of pounds?
Yeah.
And of course, their response is no. I mean, that would be silly. And yet that's how most women approach improving their health. We have this expectation in a short timeline, and if we don't get there, we quit. And then we go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so there's never any consistency. There's never enough time for your body to heal and to rewire and to mend in order to create a transformation. We're never giving it a chance.
Yeah. And so what I hear you say is, redefining self-discipline as well. So if the word discipline is a trigger word and you're like, ooh, discipline.
Yes, agreed.
I don't know if I want to be disciplined, because that certainly is the trigger for me sometimes. But what I think I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when you redefine self-discipline, you're actually giving respect and that gift to nourish yourself, right? And all those 1,000 daily choices that you're making. So how else can we begin to cultivate self-discipline in our lives, but also in our work, like in the work we do?
Do you have children?
Yes.
Okay. Children are a great example. So as a parent, we discipline our children out of love, right? We don't help them we don't tell them, what to eat and prepare those foods and tell them to go to bed at a certain time and brush their teeth out of hate or out of like a disrespectful place. We do it from a place of deep, unconditional love.
Yeah.
So isn't it interesting that in that scenario, we can completely see how discipline is a part of love? And yet when it comes to ourselves, we almost hear the word discipline and we define it as lack of freedom. And here's what I would argue. When we live in a space of not having any parameters with ourselves, that isn't love either. Yep. Ignoring what your body needs or just never putting parameters on anything in your life is actually disrespectful.
Right, because there's no boundaries that to kind of keep you on the track that you're headed, right? Like what other
Well, it's kind of like letting a toddler run around with a pair of scissors, just have fun.
Yeah.
That's going to go well.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So I completely hear what you're saying. And I've actually done a lot of podcasts exactly on that topic, that discipline is a trigger word for a lot of people because we define it as someone else's set of expectations placed on our life. We kind of think of that parent model.
Yeah.
But self-discipline is forming your own principles and your own value system and living by that. And when you don't live by that, you get into what I call integrity pain. And that is a very real kind of pain for women. Like, yes, having extra weight on your body can be painful. Having joint pain, having headaches, all of that can be physical pain.
Yep.
But integrity pain is like this deep emotional knowing that you could be doing better and you're not.
And that you're out of alignment of your core values and how you what you truly believe in, and looking at your life, kind of zooming out and going, what is this hot mess express? Yeah. This is not what I signed up for. Yeah. What does the role of grace and grit play in all of this in your mind? Why are those two words so terribly important for you?
Yeah. So grace to me is, well, first I'll say this. Grace and grit it can be a very physical perspective. So I come from the dance world, which I associate with grace, and I got very into heavy weight training at some point in my life. And I don't fit in either one of those boxes. I don't define as a dancer. I don't define as a heavy weight trainer. Like, I love it all. And it's okay to love it all.
Yeah.
And find that happy balance for yourself. But from a theoretical perspective, grace is really loving yourself unconditionally. It's forgiveness. It's slowing down. It is setting boundaries, right? It's kind of it's like a softening, right? It's a softening of ourself. And like you said at the beginning of the podcast, you can look at it kind of as that masculine feminine. It's definitely what many would define as a little bit more feminine. But grit is the self-discipline born out of self-love. Grit is what it takes sometimes to be graceful with ourselves. So to forgive is a practice. And a lot of people can theoretically say, I understand the value of forgiving myself, and yet they're not doing anything every day to lean into the practice of forgiving themselves. They're not showing up to do the work, right? So understanding a concept is not the same as applying the concept. And I always tell my clients, like, there's this wide gap for most women between knowing and doing.
Yes.
And grit helps us with the doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me also wonder, this play on masculine versus feminine, there is masculine elements to grace and there are feminine elements to grit. I mean, when I think of the word grit, I think of perseverance, not giving up, like continuing on and finding that deeper drive inside you to go after the things that you want and need. When I think of the word grace, and this has actually been a word that I've been embracing for the last year or so, and it's been really powerful for me. Grace to me also means surrender, like truly surrendering to your expectations, to feeling like it has to be a certain way, surrendering to perfectionism because it's a lie. Like all of those things, like grace is that gives you that ultimate surrender to move into a flow state as well.
It's so true. And just to sort of add on to what you said, grit is knowing that health is a lifelong journey. It's every day for the rest of your life. It is a journey. It's not a destination. And that's what the diet industry teaches it. It's a destination. It's the weight on the scale. It's a clothing size. It's a certain look. And I think that surrender plays a big role in the fact that you will do a lot of things along your health journey because deep down it's what you need. Yeah. Right? Like maybe you'll eat some, really great nutritious food for the week and you'll put yourself to bed at a reasonable time and you'll hydrate yourself and maybe you'll do some meditations. And the grace comes in from not getting the result you expected and persevering anyway because it's how you respect your body. It's how you respect your mind and your soul. Yeah. And so it's not an either or equation. I see women take the concept of grace or self-compassion to the point of not doing anything. They use it as rationale for not showing up, right? I love I'm not going to push myself that hard because I love myself, right? Or they want to stay in, they use it as a reason to stay comfortable. I also see women use discipline to the point of self-destruction. And so living at the ends of the extremes that's not where you're going to find your deep health. Your deep health is going to be somewhere. There's a sweet spot for you in the center of those two. And I cannot tell you where that sweet spot is. I can guide you closer to it, but no one is ever going to know how you feel in your body and what the right balance of those two is. It requires an incredibly deep level of honesty with yourself. Yeah. It's all about self-leadership. Health is about self-leadership. It really is. And it's not taught that way. It's taught as, let me have someone else tell me what to do. Let me have someone else be the expert on my body.
Yeah, give me the magic pill so I can just, buy that and then that will solve my problems and we can move on to something else that's broken. Buy that pill and solve that and move on. Yeah.
And we can also blame when something doesn't work. And really, it's deep health, in my opinion, after so many years of being in this field, it's about being self-directed. It's about getting in the arena and trying a lot of things on to find out what works for you and what doesn't. And also to recognize that what your health requires at every age and stage of life is radically different. Yeah. Right? If you start up a business this year, your self-care is going to look a little different than it did maybe a couple years ago when you had a completely different life. Yep. And moving into your 40s and 50s, you have a whole different hormonal challenge than you did in your 20s that requires a different level of self-care. And I do want to say this because I think this is really relevant to your listeners. As we move into our 40s and 50s, estrogen and progesterone are starting to decline in our hormonal system. And do you know what estrogen and progesterone are really good at doing? They're really good at helping us to manage stress. So we are living the most stressful years of our life because we're running businesses, raising children, taking care of aging parents, all of these things. And we have the least amount of the hormones that are helping to soften that cortisol response.
Dang it.
and plus we're going through perimenopause and menopause.
By the way.
Which is exactly what that is.
Yeah.
And we wonder why it's so hard. And so I tell women, instead of falling victim to menopause and perimenopause, we need to look at it as an opportunity, which it is, to learn how to better manage our stress. Because if we don't, we will suffer our way through.
Right.
That's a given.
And what maybe worked in our 20s and 30s is not going to necessarily be the same thing that's going to work during this phase either, it sounds like.
Most definitely not.
Yeah.
In fact, I would argue that, because I have some outliers who are in, their college years, and their bodies respond very differently than a woman, say in her late 40s. So she can physically push herself a little harder. Youth definitely lets you get away with a little bit more, but I almost am hesitant to use that phrase because you're never really getting away with anything, right? It's always affecting your physiology. You just don't feel it. You don't maybe have as much of an expression as you do when you're older. So yeah.
Well, it's the truth. I mean, I can think about my time in college in my early 20s and all the all-nighters and, Red Bull drinks and all the things. And it seems like I could recover pretty quickly. Carl, if I do an all-nighter, heck, if I even stay out past 11:30, I'm a little bit rusty the next day, and I'm 41. So I certainly know the evolution of listening to my own body of like, oh, that used to be something that I thought I could do, but it certainly is not my new reality here. So, okay, let's break this down. You talk about 4 key areas that we can focus on that will really help us reclaim our health. Let's go through each one of those and take a deep dive. So what's the first one?
Yeah, the first one is the practice of awareness, which in our hustling, always putting more on our to-do list world, we're not taking enough time to be self-aware. And I would also say that by reaching out for all these diets and sort of checklists of tell me what to do and I'll follow that, that's not self-awareness. Self-aware, it can be if it's used in the right way, but I would argue that a lot of people are actually using a lot of protocols so they don't have to go in and get to know themselves better, right? It's easier to just tell me what to eat, just give me a meal plan. But I want to know, why do you eat what you eat? And what is your relationship with food? It's not just what you eat, but how do you eat? And why do you eat? Like, let's dive into those things, because if we don't, after this diet is over, you're still going to have the same challenge.
Right, because
you're not really getting to know yourself.
Deeper rooted issue that's underlying that decision that, and that's the thing. I mean, everybody's done some sort of 30-day weight loss plan or something and maybe have gotten quick results. And then all of a sudden, day 31 to day 60, what happens? You gain the weight back because, the newness of that new thing, your magic pill solution, wore off because you didn't actually do that deep inner core work, right?
Absolutely. And food, I will say, I feel is food and alcohol are 2 things that we buffer with so readily. And what I mean by that is we want to feel better in the moment, and food and alcohol are really fast ways to do that. Unfortunately, they have really big consequences down the road with repeated behavior. But in the moment, it helps us to take our attention off what we're feeling now,
right? If
it's something we don't want to be feeling. And a lot of the work that I do with my clients is learning how to feel the good, the bad, and the ugly without trying to fix it or blow over it or distract from it. Like, let's be with it. Let's just let it move through. Let's let that emotion metabolize. And then you don't have to reach for all these other things.
Yeah. So now, how can we start to actually do and cultivate the practice of self-awareness? Like, how do we track our behavior patterns? Yeah.
First of all, I think you mentioned at the very beginning just your experiment with slowing down, right? And giving yourself permission to slow down. And that is 101. Like if we can't slow down and make time for self-awareness, we'll never be self-aware. So just carving out 5 or 10 minutes in the day where maybe you meditate, but I think meditation is a lot like self-love. It's a big ask for people who haven't sat with themselves for a long time. It's 5 or 10 minutes doesn't seem like a big ask, but it can be really uncomfortable. So maybe you journal. Maybe you just go outside and put your feet in the grass and you don't do anything else. Like you don't look at your cell phone, you don't, have a conversation. You're just with yourself for those 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe you just do something with complete focus and attention, like washing the dishes or, picking up after your kids. Like you do that with a different energy and a real awareness. Yeah. And absolutely tracking behavior, I'm a huge fan of. Because people come into me, work with me all the time and they say, you know what, I don't understand what the issue is. I eat great. I'm like, okay, show me. Like, show yourself. Like, it's not even about me, but if I'm going to help you, I need to see data.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating is after clients journal their food for a week, they come back with a totally different story. Like, oh, I didn't realize. It's like, yeah, journaling keeps you really honest. That's why we balance our bank accounts, right? Like, nobody has an issue with that because it keeps us honest.
Yeah.
But when it comes to food journaling, we're all of a sudden, I don't want a food journal. Well, why? Do you not want that level of honesty with yourself? Right? I mean, yes, it's a little tedious. Nobody likes sitting down to balance their checkbook. I mean, I don't really balance my checkbook anymore, but we all still sit down and look at our finances, right?
Right. Instead of brushing it under the rug. Yeah. I mean, that's it is, and I think you're absolutely right. Like, even if you're tracking your food intake just for a week, just a week, just to get a clear understanding of what the true data points are, you might discover late night snacking is actually a thing, or the 2:00 break, where you eat something that you just like, well, it's mindless. You don't even register it in your brain, might actually go, something's happened here. But I also wonder, beyond food, it's also tracking when you get triggered as well. Like if somebody says something and you're like, that thing, right?
Yeah. So one of my favorite exercises is called break the chain. And it's literally when you catch yourself in a moment of, let's just say you're emotionally eating at the end of the day, because that's a very relatable thing for a lot of women. Yep. We get home from work, we had a really healthy meal planned, and now we're going to order pizza. And we get the pizza and we eat half of it. And either in the moment of eating it or probably after the fact is when you're going to do this. I encourage my clients to say, let's look back at the day and figure out what led up to that moment.
Yeah.
Right? Let's just track that behavior. And you notice that they'll talk you through the day and they woke up late and they were already frustrated when they head out the door. They get to work and the project they've been working on has fallen apart, or there's some challenge with a colleague. Well, of course, when they raced out of the door in the morning, they forgot to bring their lunch. So they haven't eaten in several hours. So their blood sugar is now low. So there's all of these things, and you can see the snowball effect. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, like, I can totally see why that happened. And there's a moment where they have an opportunity to just forgive and let go of all the shame, because now you've witnessed the behavior. And so you have a choice. Are you going to maybe approach tomorrow a little differently? If not, totally a choice. But I would argue that most people are going to be very inspired after seeing that chain of events to say, I'm going to do some things to make tomorrow go a little more smoothly. And to feel like I'm more taken care of.
And I think that's where grace comes in, right? Is giving yourself that permission and forgiveness as well. It's not about the shame of, I hit the big red F it button again and I ate half the pizza. No. It's giving yourself grace in that moment to go, zoom out. Look at that person there in that petri dish. Of course she acted that way, because look at all the other things that happened along the way, and she made that decision to go that path.
Yeah, some women will take the break the chain exercise or tracking behavior as an opportunity to instill a lot of judgment, right? And criticize themselves and shame themselves. And I always remind women that is not the objective.
Right.
The reason we do these exercises is for you to get to know yourself better, because when you know yourself better, you can do better. And that there's a lot of coaching work in just that concept. Right? Because many women are just in that habitual pattern of every time they witness a behavior that's not perfect or in line with their expectation, they use it as an opportunity to beat themselves up. And when you beat yourself up, you feel worse. And when you feel worse, you tend not to show up for the things that you say are important to you in the way that you want to.
And
so it's not serving you.
Yeah, you make poor choices. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, talk to us about the second key area that we should focus on.
Yeah. So once you start developing some awareness about how you're living your life or what your patterns are and here's the thing, you have to pick something to start with. You can't all of a sudden start tracking food and sleep and water and exercise and all overnight. Please don't do that. Pick one thing. Let's just go with food because food is, it's something that women ask me about a lot.
Yeah.
Once you've identified some patterns with food and you see where you can do better, so you see the gaps, as I call them, you need to start organizing yourself to change that behavior. Because without a plan, you're always going to keep repeating the behavior because your brain is wired that way. Mm-hmm. You have repeated behaviors so often that now they're a super highway in your brain, which means you don't have to think about the behaviors, you just do them. You react to life instead of respond to it. So how do we organize ourselves so we start responding with conscious decision? And that means we put some forethought into our day, right? We put forethought into what time do I want to get up tomorrow, right? What time am I going to get up? And then once I get up, what am I going to do the first 30 minutes that I'm up, right? Am I going to save that time for me? I hope you do, by the way, because I think that's a really powerful way to start your day.
Totally.
How am I going to eat tomorrow? If today was a disaster with food, how am I going to navigate that a little bit more gracefully tomorrow? And it's just asking yourself some pointed questions and going through a process of organizing yourself, which I always ask my clients to do it 24 hours in advance, because that's when we do our best thinking. Today, you will think really clearly about how you want to treat yourself tomorrow. Tomorrow, you will be putting out fires. So if you expect yourself to make good decisions tomorrow, you probably won't in the moment.
And I also imagine that if you're planning the next day ahead, you're not doing it at 10 o'clock at night after you're exhausted from this day, because your brain's already in the I just want to go to sleep kind of mode, right?
Yes.
So it's actually taking, like you say, that 24 hours in advance and going, okay, today I didn't manage to eat lunch until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That was a mistake. Okay, what did I learn from that? Okay, so what am I going to do to make sure I have healthy fruits and vegetables, within the arm's reach, so I can at least shove some sugar snap peas in my mouth instead of just going hungry. Yeah.
It's literally that failing forward concept, right? You fail, you learn from it, and then you go forward better informed.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So you can make better decisions and you organize your life to make that possible.
Okay, so step 1, practice of self-awareness, tracking your behavior patterns, just being aware and acknowledging what that is.
Yes.
Step 2, the practice of organization. You realize that you need a plan. So how do you organize yourself and others, that your life really, to set yourself up for success? Yeah. Okay, step 3.
Step 3 is the practice of follow through. So you may have all this awareness and you may have the color-coded, beautiful plan, which women love to do, right?
Right.
They spend so much time making the plan and then they fail to show up. Yeah. They start negotiating, compromising, and rationalizing their way out of their own commitment to themselves. And so this is where I spend, of course, a ton of time coaching my clients, is the practice to follow through. Yeah. How do we show up for ourselves even though we don't feel in the moment like showing up? Because quite frankly, that's going to be a large majority of the time. 50% of the time at least, you're not going to feel like you want to show up for the thing that you planned. Maybe it was a healthy meal you were going to make. Maybe it's a 20-minute walk you were going to take with your dog. How do we follow through? And all of that, I will tell you just in a nutshell, has to do with how you're thinking. How you're thinking will drive action or inaction, 100%. So if you're thinking in a way that causes you to not show up, then we just need to address those thinking patterns and choose different thoughts.
Right. And that comes back to what we were talking about earlier, of reframing the word self-discipline as something that is positive rather than something that is limiting you from whatever it is that you want. Self-discipline is not self-loathing. Self-care is an act of devotion, as you say, and realizing that that is truly a gift that you're giving yourself. Then the idea of following through with whatever plan or whatever meal you've packed, it's a reward, and that makes it a little bit easier for our little monkey brains to say, oh, okay, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What else helps us in follow through? Is there any simple exercises or mindset shifts that you would recommend?
I think my biggest mindset shift is just to pivot the thoughts. So when today you're going to have plenty of opportunity to practice this, everybody listening well. You have something on your schedule, hopefully that you put in there specifically for you.
Yeah.
If you didn't put that in there, please do. But one thing at least that you planned for yourself. And especially those of you with businesses and busy lives, it is so easy to bump up against that moment, that appointment you made with yourself, and start talking yourself out of it. So in that moment, I would recommend that you ask yourself, what am I thinking that's causing me to not want to show up? And the thoughts will come like in a flood. I'm too busy. I have so much to do. This person is expecting this response from this email, blah, blah. Like there's going to be 1,000 thoughts. Okay, I can see why all of those thoughts, and you can even just pick one, is leading me to not show up for myself.
Yeah.
But what is also true right now? Like, why did I even put that on my schedule to begin with? Well, because I know that when I do these things, I'm actually better in my business. Mm-hmm. I work more efficiently. I have more energy. I'm more creative. Okay, now how do you feel? Like literally in a matter of seconds, like I'm going to go do that thing because I know it's probably one of the best investments I could actually make in my business in this moment.
Yeah.
So you pivot to thinking, and this is a practice. I say practice for all these things because practice is a very different word than perfection, right? It's not about perfection. It's about being willing to try it on day after day after day until you start building a stronger skill set and you start getting more proficient. So give yourself permission to really practice.
So in this particular realm, this is something that I've incorporated into my work schedule, and it really, really helps. I've been doing this for a little over a year now. Every Tuesday morning, I book into my calendar, all my team can see it, an hour of just getting out in nature and walking. There's a local arboretum here, just being out in the sunshine, walking. I throw on my favorite podcast, or if I feel like it, just throwing on my favorite playlist. It's a gift that I give myself, and in that process, I'm getting exercise, I'm getting vitamin D, I'm getting away from my computer and away from my inbox of figuring out and putting out other people's fires. And it's a gift. It truly is, because it's a place where I am not getting interrupted and can find clarity to start my morning. I actually wish I could do it every morning. And the truth is, yes, I can. That's the beauty of being your own business owner. But yeah, something simple like that might be something to try this week. Well, what would stop you from going and spending an hour out in nature tomorrow? Like, what would stop you?
Yeah, it's learning how that resistance. I always teach my clients that resistance is going to be a copilot. Yeah. She's just always going to be in the chair next to you. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we always expect that motivation is going to be by our bedside table with a cup of coffee in the morning. She never is. It's always resistance, reminding you of all the reasons why you can't live your day the way you wanted to. And I think that when we just accept that resistance is going to be there and keep doing our things anyway without really getting into it, diving into this relationship with resistance, we just realize she starts to soften. She's always going to be there, but she's not always going to be so loud.
All right. So stage 4, what's that?
Stage 4 is the practice of realigning, because let's face it, right? Life throws you a lot of curveballs. There's surgeries and deaths in the family and moves across country and new relationships. And oh my word, is there so much opportunity to say now is just not the time, right? Your self-care has to change dramatically. And usually it's within a few days. And it's not even you're no longer intentional about your self-care. You're just in survival mode.
Yeah.
Those things are going to happen. And we have to practice realigning sooner than later. Because if we don't, we can spend years, decades, a lifetime being misaligned. And I see this all the time, right? Where someone was in the best shape of their life and then something really big happened in their life. They got off kilter and they had no strategy or practice for bringing themselves back. And here's the trick: is the sooner you bring yourself back, the easier it is. The longer you go, then of course it's you feel like you have to start all over again. And so it's how do we recognize not just when we're aligned, but when we're misaligned? I know for me, I get super reactive. I get, I get very kind of unfocused. I get, I don't put the things that I say are most important in the forefront of my schedule. And so I know what my identifying patterns are for being misaligned. And when I start to see those, I'm like, oh, what needs to change here? Because this isn't acceptable. This is not the space I want to live in. And so I teach my clients the practice, of course, of realigning themselves.
And I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier of resistance as your copilot. If you are misaligned and you're continually making choices that are misaligned with what you truly believe in and what you truly are wanting in your life, guess what? Resistance becomes a stronger and stronger and stronger voice in the minivan of your life, right? Of going like, well, see, I told you, because you keep making these poor choices, and you keep on continuing to be misaligned. Like, why bother? Like, I think that's what she starts to say, at least to me. So I can certainly see the truth there.
Yeah, realigning is, and misalignment, it's just a very relevant thing in all of our lives. We all have lots of opportunity to get misaligned. And it's just, again, going back to self-awareness, that if you have a practice of staying aware, you're probably going to spend less time being misaligned.
Yeah. And again, remember, all of this translates back into your business. So if you own a business, if you lead a team or manage a team, it's all seen. You think you're hiding it internally, but it is seen in the bags under your eyes, in the way you carry your body, the way you show up to a pitch meeting, the way you make strategic decisions on what products and services you put out in the world. It translates. And so I think what sometimes happens is that we think that self-care is sort of like, oh, yeah, that'd be nice when I get to it. Because I got this 80 bazillion to-do list already, and I'm going to put that at the bottom of the list because everything else is so much more important. But in fact, it is such a key integral part to how you run your business because you are the face of your brand, right?
You are. And also, it's if we don't have our health, you have no business.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you can't support your business and you can't show up for it and you can't lead it, what do you really have?
Yeah.
I've never seen a woman dedicate more time and attention to her health and not take her business to a new level. Because it's all, I always joke with people that I happen to be very passionate about the health conversation. But the principles that change our health change every facet of our life. They improve our finances, they improve our relationships, they improve our businesses. Because it's about consistency and awareness. When you're aware and you're consistent about the practices that make those things strong, right? And resistance is going to show up in all those arenas. So I see people who are really awesome at managing their finances or really incredible at managing businesses. And I'm like, you could be awesome at managing your health because it's all the same things you're already applying in that arena. And now taking it over and putting the focus on you. And that right there is a massive roadblock for a lot of women because they associate it with selfishness or associate it with being indulgent because, they don't have other things are more important than they are. Right. To which I say, really?
Yeah. Well, I think that's really interesting. Again, take the 4 key areas that Courtney just relayed to us and see how you could lay it on top and apply it to your business, to your finances, to your relationships, self-awareness, organization, follow through, and realignment. I mean, that really does sit nicely on big decisions in your life and other key areas. So absolutely. If all of this is super intriguing to you and you're like, oh my God, I feel like we're getting to somewhere, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you listen to Courtney's podcast, Grace and Grit. And you can find it online. Her website is graceandgrit.com. And you can listen to it wherever you're listening to this podcast. Just search for Grace and Grit and you'll be able to find it. So Courtney, I have a couple of questions for you before we sign off and that I like to ask all guests that come onto our podcast. First and foremost, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging you a bit?
Yeah. So this isn't a book that I'm actually currently reading for the first time, but this is a book that I refer to like probably almost daily. Yeah. And it's Emotional Agility by Susan David. And it is a book that I think every human on the planet should read because it's you can apply the principles of the book like we were just saying, to any facet of your life, because it's really learning how to be with hard emotion, which is really one of the underpinnings for why we aren't living the life that we want to be living, right? So that is a book that I just can't speak highly, and it definitely challenged me. And pretty much, I have it right here, actually. I've never had a book that I've earmarked. Do you see all those earmarks? Like, this book is so overly earmarked because I just pull from it constantly, and I'm always just referring to it with clients and on my podcast. So that's the book that I would definitely encourage people. The subtitle is Get Unstuck, Embrace Change, and Thrive in Work and Life.
Brilliant. Well, we'll put the link in the show notes for that book so you guys can check that out on our website, thesimplifierspodcast.com. So tell us, who's one person in your network, somebody that you know personally, that you just feel is up to brilliant things right now, that we can shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe even one day have them on the podcast?
Yeah, somebody I think that would be really great for your listeners and just for any person anywhere is Courtney Carver of Soulful Simplicity. I did have her on my podcast, but I have followed her for years, and she has such a fascinating story. She was in corporate America. She was diagnosed with MS, and she just radically had to change the way she was living her life. And, she basically sold everything she owns to sort of live more simply, so she didn't have to go to this corporate job. She built this incredible business because she started to honor what she was really fascinated by. And she really radically changed her health story, all because she gave herself the grace to simplify her life. And I feel like this is just a message we can't be talking enough about these days, because we're just piling on more and more responsibility and wondering why we're breaking down and why we feel like we can't support all of that in a really, productive way. And it's no mystery. It's because we're taking on too much, and we need to scale back, and we need to, I call it trimming the fat of our lives. What are the things that aren't really necessary or in line with what you say you value?
Yeah.
It might be stuff you're interested in, but if it's not one of those top values, it probably needs to go.
Yeah. We'll put a link in the show notes for Courtney as well. I mean, she sounds incredible, like right up our alley. So people can check her out as well. So, Courtney, do you hang out online? Where can people connect with you the most?
Yeah, probably Facebook. I definitely have a Grace and Grit Facebook page, Grace and Grit. And I have a community in there that just gives people more resources than what I offer on the podcast. But also Instagram. I'm on there pretty much daily. Grace Grit is my handle.
Okay,
so people
perfect.
can find me there as well.
We'll put those links in the show notes for everybody. But her Facebook page is Grace Grit LLC is the handle for that. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell us, what's one thing you're grateful for right now in this moment?
I would say, just based on our conversation, I'm so grateful for having the ability to make conscious choice.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's so easy sometimes, and I spent years of my life in a space of really not just feeling like life was happening to me, that I really didn't have the ability to change my thinking and change my decisions. And I just love that about life and about evolving as a human, that we can change right now, today. We just have to decide. Yeah. And then we have to show up for ourselves and organize ourselves and all of those practices we talked about in order to make it a consistent practice. And so for me, just the ability to make conscious choice and change my mind at any time is incredible. Yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
And within all of our grasps. So just a reminder to you guys, Grace and Grit, they've got this inner circle, and actually they're opening the doors on October 21st. And it's a monthly membership site that helps women become more self-directed along their health journey. And again, that's the key point, helping you uncover inside you what you actually need to thrive. So I highly recommend that you guys check that out, see if it's the right step for you as well. You can go to her website, graceandgrit.com, for more information, or again, just click the link in the show notes to get more details about that inner circle there as well. So my final question for you today is this, Courtney. And before I get there, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge you. I think what you're talking about is so incredibly important. You were recommended to me by Amber de la Garza, the productivity specialist. Talk about a girl who can plow through a to-do list, right? She knows how to get stuff done. But this is the other side of it all, right? And it's so important. It's not a this and, oh yeah, if I've got time, this. It's yes and for both. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing and showing up how you are.
Thank you.
So someone somewhere is listening to this episode right now and she's inspired. And something somewhere along the way you said, just like me, popped open a new thought and go, hang on. Wait, I'm hearing this differently today. And she's inspired to go back and reclaim her health and to really put more focus on her self-care. What's one thing that you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
Yeah, it would be that you know enough right now to start. You don't need a new book, a new teacher, a new class, a new product, a new anything. You know enough to take the next step. And the next step that I would recommend is choose a 5-minute action purely for your self-care that you are willing to commit fiercely to for the next 2 weeks. And a lot of people will hear that and say, I can handle more. Give me something else. Give me something more. And it might feel easy the first day or two. And then watch how you start wanting to compromise and negotiate your way out of just that 5-minute action. And why expect more of yourself or put more on yourself if you can't simply show up for a 5-minute action? So I don't care what it is, but something that just feels like it's nurturing you, nourishing you in a positive way, and commit to it for 2 weeks. And then once you have proven to yourself that, yeah, I can show up and I feel better and this is great, then you can add something else. I call it stacking habits. I usually stack habits with my clients every 2 weeks over a year-long period. And this is so counter to what the diet industry tells us, right? They overhaul the life overnight and wonder why we can't sustain it a couple of weeks later. Yeah. So let's reverse that. Let's reverse engineer all that and start small and, acclimate, like start building our way up to being able to handle more.
And you got this. You can go do the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. 5-minute action with what you know right now. And if you question if it's too difficult, it is, break it down even more.
Yeah. Courtney, thank you so much for your time today.
You're so welcome.